I memorized a 2.5-page monologue, and you can do it too. Here's how. Welcome back to Dear Theater Older Sister. I'm Narée, and I share all the things that I wish I knew when I started musical theater, so that you can have an easier time getting started. On today's episode, we're covering one of your most asked questions. How do you not blank during monologues or scenes when you have a lot of lines? If you're receiving a monologue or a dialogue-heavy scene, it can be extremely scary to think about memorizing all of those lines, but it's actually not as hard as you think. The starting point for any line-heavy work that you may be doing, in my experience, has been understanding what my goal is in that scene and chaptering it. What usually happens to me is that I get the script and I look at the words on the page and I panic, and the scene all of a sudden becomes more about the words and less about the story. Not good, and that's where you start blanking. I stopped blanking when I took the time to understand what it is that I was trying to accomplish by saying the words in that scene and putting them into chunks or chapters. For example, I once did a very obscure show called Scotland Road a while back. It's sort of like a psychological thriller about the Titanic. Spoilers if you've never seen it, and you should because it's pretty good. It's a show with only 4 people, with the 2 main characters being a partially mute woman who claims to be a survivor of the Titanic who is locked in an asylum, and a man obsessed with the Titanic trying to unmask her true identity. When she starts recalling things about the Titanic that only somebody aboard that ship would know, he starts losing it. And that's when the audience learns that he's actually the one locked in the insane asylum and she's just a figment of his imagination. There's a monologue that I had at the end where the woman starts detailing her entire journey from start to finish, from boarding the boat to getting in the crash. And it quite literally was 2.5 pages long. Terrifying, right? It actually wasn't as bad to learn as you might think that it was, because I stopped looking at the monologue as a whole and I started looking at it like it was chapters from a book. And I understood why I was saying what I was saying in the first place. The first thing I had to understand about that monologue is that it was pretty much the most my character had ever spoken the entire show because she's partially mute. And it's at that point in the show where she's starting to take control and she's driving this man quite literally insane. So the reason behind this monologue was giving that man everything he wanted to hear to complete his insanity. And it was my job as an actor to make sure that I sold that. Knowing that, I was able to move on to the chaptering. For every story, as we well know, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. I like to think of monologues and scenes as their own miniature stories that get their own miniature beginning, middle, and end. So naturally, that monologue started with her talking about her decision to board the Titanic, the middle would outline her time on the ship, and the end would result in the crash. Once I started viewing monologues like that, it kind of served as a map, because I knew that I couldn't get lost if I knew what chapter I was on. And like I said, you can do the same for scenes that you do for monologues, because they're all stories in their own right, short or long. TLDR, remember what the beginning, middle, and end of your monologue or scene is, and understand why you have to deliver those lines in the first place. This will guide your intention and ensure that you stay on track and never lose your way. But I'm not saying this is a foolproof way to go about learning your lines. I have had plenty of times where I have said the wrong thing at the wrong time or blanked, or been on stage when somebody else did. But guess what? It happens. We're human. So when it does, and I say when because inevitably it will, give yourself grace, pick yourself back up, and keep going. That's the beauty of live theater. It's always changing and growing with us. So I hope that helps you with your monologues and your scenes moving forward. What questions do you want featured on Dear Theater Older Sister? Leave a comment and let me know.